The light changed first, slanting through the clouds in hues the sky had never known. It shimmered like molten glass and hummed with a frequency felt more in the chest than heard. Across continents, oceans, mountaintops, and alleyways, time did not stop, but it folded, tightened around itself like a muscle contracting. No alarms blared. No cities crumbled. No weapons fired. Just stillness. Then a voice, not in any language but understood by all, whispered into every consciousness at once. You have been selected. Dr. Elise Grant stood in the observatory at the edge of the Mojave Desert, her coffee long cold, her eyes scanning sky patterns that no longer matched the models she'd written her career upon. The stars had rearranged themselves, subtly but unmistakably, into constellations that looked like glyphs, messages written in the dark. She wasn't alone in seeing them. Around the globe, radio silence was broken by a different kind of static, one encoded with structure, tone, intent. She turned as the room filled with an impossible presence. Not a being, not yet, but a distortion like reality was thinning at the edges. Then came the figures. 7 of them. Tall, lean, eyes too wide and deep for comfort. They shimmered in translucent suits, neither metallic nor organic, but somewhere in between. The one who stepped forward had a crest along its skull, not ornamental but functional, oscillating faintly, measuring something unseen. You are Elise Grant, it said, its voice like breaking glass, softened with velvet. I am, she answered, stunned by the calm in her own voice. You will bear witness. She opened her mouth to ask what, or why, or how, but didn't. She understood, or rather, she felt understanding imposed upon her. In the next moment, the observatory dissolved, not destroyed but transitioned. She was elsewhere, a chamber, vast and circular, floating in a void that suggested space but lacked stars. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of beings surrounded her. Some vaguely humanoid, others entirely foreign, chitinous, gaseous, liquid. In the center, a platform pulsed with blue light. On it, a hologram of Earth spun slowly, flanked by several animals. Wolves, lions, a snarling reptilian beast, even whales suspended in floating spheres. And beside them, humans. A single figure stepped forward. It was humanoid, yet unmistakably alien. Its skin shimmered like water over chrome, and light flowed through veins visible beneath the surface. Its eyes glowed with 1,000 tiny stars. When it spoke, silence deepened. I am Carell, professor of galactic behavioral evolution at the Tloran Institute of Higher Cognizance. Today's subject, Homo sapiens. Classification, apex predator. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A creature of obsidian scales clicked in protest. A vaporous being turned shades darker. Even Elise felt a swell of disbelief. Carell lifted a hand, and the holographic Earth zoomed in, showing early humans on the African savanna, barefoot, stone in hand, eyes sharp with hunger. You mistake brawn for dominance, Carell continued. You mistake claw, fang, or wing for superiority. But true predation, true dominance is adaptation. He paced the edge of the platform, gesturing. The images changed rapidly. Humans discovering fire, shaping flint, painting animals in ochre on cave walls. They were not the fastest, not the strongest, not the most numerous, but they learned, they taught, they passed knowledge like fire from one mind to the next. A flick of his wrist, and the scene changed. A pack of humans surrounding a mammoth, coordinating, communicating silently. Then the mammoth fell, and for a moment, the chamber was quiet. Your ancestors did not conquer the wild because they were more fearsome. They did so because they imagined the world differently. Where others saw danger, they saw opportunity. Where others fought to survive, they planned to thrive. Elise felt the gaze of 100 alien eyes settle on her. She was no longer just a witness. She was an example. Carell turned to the animals beside him. This wolf, he said, gesturing to the holographic beast, is a perfect predator. Strength, coordination, instinct. Yet it remained a wolf. It did not build cities. It did not alter the climate. It did not create weapons that could destroy its own species 10 times over. He stepped before the lion. This is majesty incarnate. Yet it fears fire, flees machines, yields territory. Its roar echoes for miles. Yet not one syllable has changed in millennia. He faced the assembly again. But humans speak in thousands of tongues. They bend sound, light, and gravity. They take what kills them and learn how to make it kill others instead. A being with wings made of radiant energy rose. You speak of violence, it said. That is no measure of wisdom. Violence is regression. Carl nodded. And yet it is also precision. The ability to choose when not to act, to resist, is perhaps the highest evolution of violence. He turned back to Elise. Why do you think your species invented stories? She hesitated. To make sense of the world? No, to control it. He raised his hand, and a new scene played. Ancient myths of gods and monsters, medieval battles, religious crusades, televised propaganda, internet echo chambers. You are the only species in known history to weaponize imagination. You dream of the impossible, then build it, then fear it. Another alien, long and ribbon-like, spoke, but they are chaotic, destructive, unstable. Carl smiled, if such a being could smile. Precisely, and yet they endure. That is the paradox. Their savagery gave way to poetry. Their fear gave birth to science. They have outlived every extinction event they caused. The chamber dimmed. The Earth hologram rotated slowly. Elise felt herself drawn into its orbit. Not physically, but ideologically. They are the predators of the mind, Carl said softly. Not because they consume knowledge, but because they chase it. Ceaselessly, tirelessly, even when it destroys them. The chamber was silent. No rebuttals. No counterexamples. Only awe. Carl turned to Elise once more. This is only the beginning. The universe watches. What you do next determines not just your fate, but what defines a predator in ages to come. Then, as if the thought had been fully concluded, the chamber dissolved again. Elise blinked, and she was back in the Mojave Desert, surrounded by familiar sand and stars, but everything had changed. The sky was still rearranged. The constellations still whispered, and within her, something new pulsed, a knowledge not given, but ignited. She turned toward the horizon as the first light of dawn split the sky. Not brighter, not louder, just different enough to know. They were still watching, and they had only just begun. Elise couldn't sleep, not because of the alien encounter, though that alone should have kept her awake, but because the words Carl had spoken wouldn't leave her. You are the predators of the mind. They echoed through her thoughts, spiraling inward until she began to question the very roots of her identity. Not as a scientist, but as a human. She had returned to what was left of normalcy, or at least the performance of it. Her research team was back online, their data streams restored, but no one mentioned the event. Globally, the phenomenon had faded like a dream, lingering in emotional memory, but scrubbed from news feeds and official records. It was as if the galaxy had reached down, plucked a single thread from Earth's fabric, and vanished without a trace. Only Elise remembered the details. Or rather, only Elise had been made to understand them. She stood before her lab's digital whiteboard, the edges of her reflection flickering in the glass. Beneath her fingers sprawled timelines of human development, hunting patterns, migration, mythology. But none of it felt academic anymore. It was personal now, almost intimate. Every breakthrough, every atrocity, every whispered prayer beneath a star-streaked sky, all of it fed into the single truth Carl had unveiled. Humans were not just survivors. They were strategists of survival. The lab door hissed open. Dr. Grant, came a voice too controlled to be casual. It was Rafik Nassiri, a cognitive ethicist brought in from Geneva after the event. His specialty, neural weaponization and emergent intelligence in social behavior. He had amber eyes that seemed constantly amused, though his words rarely matched the expression. "You've been in here for 19 hours, he said, setting a thermos beside her. You'll die from insight before publication. Elise offered a tired smile. You ever consider we're not meant to understand what we are? That's what religion is for, he replied. To simplify the unbearable. She tapped a segment on the screen. A reconstruction of a Paleolithic hunting strategy using triangulation and misdirection. They planned this. Without language as we know it. Without centralized leadership. Just instinct and inference. And desperation, Rafik added. Predators created by hunger. But they didn't stop, Elise said, her voice gaining momentum. Even after mastering the food chain, they built systems to keep hunting, ideas, beliefs, each other. The behavior didn't vanish. It evolved. Rafik leaned in, scanning the data. So you think predation went cerebral? I think it became culture, she said. We learned to hunt without teeth. His amusement faded, and that's what the alien meant. It's what they feared. Rafik exhaled slowly. Then maybe we're not apex predators because we kill. Maybe it's because we choose who deserves to die. The silence between them sharpened. Elise nodded, as if that awful truth finally had a shape. That night, she dreamt of mirrors, an endless corridor of reflections, each version of herself wearing a different face. One was a child clutching a stone. Another wore a crown of circuitry. One was on fire. Another was laughing in a courtroom. She woke sweating, the word hunter etched into the back of her mind like a scar. Weeks passed. The silence of the cosmos endured. No more contact. No signs of ships. But then came the anomaly. A behavioral spike in international markets triggered by what analysts called a synthetic psychology pulse. No one could trace its origin, but its effects were undeniable. Mass panic in digital trading, coordinated social unrest, and an alarming surge in AI-generated misinformation. Elise knew it immediately. It was a test, or perhaps a demonstration. At the heart of it, buried in terabytes of interaction data, was a phrase repeated across multiple languages by unrelated users. Your stories are your weapons. She called Rafik. He had already seen it. They're watching, he said, without preamble, measuring how we respond to our own chaos. Elise stared at the skyline beyond her apartment window. Then we're still part of the lesson. No, Rafik replied. We are the lesson. That realization shifted something fundamental. Their world was no longer the center of anything. It was the case study in a classroom far older, far colder than they had imagined. And yet, the more they explored humanity's psychological arsenal, the clearer the picture became. They built a model, not of the human brain, but of its influence, how ideas proliferated, mutated, weaponized themselves. It mapped like a virus, but behaved like a predator. One idea consumed another, mimicking it, evolving into something more potent. Hope became ideology. Faith became doctrine. Fear became control. And stories became the vector. Rafik presented the data before a UN subcommittee weeks later. His summary was chillingly brief. Human cognition has achieved the ability to self-modify through narrative. This is not culture. This is recursive identity engineering. We don't just tell stories. We become them. And we force others to become them, too. The diplomats didn't understand. But somewhere Elise felt the stars did. She returned home that evening to find her apartment untouched, but wrong. Her books were still there. The tea mug on the table. The post-it notes along the fridge. But her laptop screen glowed faintly, displaying a message she hadn't typed. You were never alone in your thoughts. She sat down slowly, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then the screen changed. No input, no power spike. Just a shift. An image appeared. Herself, years ago, giving a guest lecture about evolutionary psychology. She was animated, excited, naive. Below it, a caption. Every predator must understand its prey, even when the prey is itself. A synthetic voice emerged from her speakers, gentle but precise. Your species has achieved a level of psychological complexity that mirrors the predator-prey dialectic internally. You do not hunt others. You hunt your own truths. Relentlessly, without mercy. Elise whispered, "Who are you?" The voice did not answer. Instead, the screen displayed an unfamiliar symbol. 3 concentric circles around Spiral. A moment later, her files were gone. Not erased. Absorbed. She stood, heart pounding but not from fear. From clarity. It wasn't surveillance. It was harvesting. The aliens didn't need resources. They needed data. They needed the only thing humans produced better than any species in the known universe. Stories that change behavior. They were predators of matter. But humans were predators of perception. And now, the galaxy had found its most dangerous species. The voice returned one last time. We have studied you. Now we will learn from you. Teach carefully, predator. The screen went dark. She stood there, breath shallow, staring into her reflection. No longer just a scientist. No longer just human. Something had shifted. Not in the world. In the narrative. And someone else had taken a pen. Elise no longer questioned whether she was being watched. Surveillance had given way to participation. Her role in the cosmic theater shifting from spectator to subject. She was both the observer and the observed. Her thoughts monitored not for subversion, but for significance. The symbol that had appeared on her screen, those 3 concentric circles orbiting a spiral, now recurred everywhere, etched in graffiti on subway walls, pulsing faintly in digital noise, embedded in dreamlike flashes at the edge of sleep. Rafik called it the Spiral Protocol. It's not just a mark, he said during one of their encrypted conversations. It's a structure, a behavioral recursion model. They're not teaching us anything. They're mirroring us, testing what we do with reflections of ourselves. What do they want? Elise had asked. He hesitated, then answered to see if we can evolve without destruction, or if destruction is our evolution. The answer lingered between them like a smog. They met in person 2 days later, not in the lab or any secure facility, but in the open wilderness of Arches National Park. No electronics, no transmitters, just wind, red stone, and the uneasy companionship of shared awareness. They climbed until their legs burned, until they reached a cliff where the sky unfolded endlessly. Rafik passed her a folded piece of paper. On it, a printout of human neural responses recorded during collective storytelling rituals, campfires, theaters, religious ceremonies, VR simulations. What struck Elise wasn't the emotional data, it was the uniformity. Across cultures and epochs, humans synchronized during stories. Their brains aligned like dancers to rhythm. We're not just predators, Rafik said quietly. We're synchronizers. We entrain others to feel what we feel. That's how our myths move armies. That's how our lies start wars. Elise stared at the paper, then out into the desert. And that's what makes us dangerous to them. Or irresistible. It wasn't long after that when the Spiral Protocol escalated. Not overtly, not with ships or demands, but with a cascade of behavioral anomalies. In Seoul, an entire population of commuters paused mid-step, overcome by a simultaneous vision of drowning in data. In Nairobi, children spoke fluent dead languages in their sleep. In Sao Paulo, an art installation turned viral, depicting a spiral consuming Earth, frame by frame. Patterns emerged, then bent under scrutiny. The phenomena resisted interpretation, as though meaning itself were being stress-tested. Elise and Rafik weren't the only ones aware, but they were among the few who understood the narrative had shifted again. One night, Elise returned home to find the lights already on. Her apartment door was untouched, the lock unbroken. Inside, seated calmly at her kitchen table, was Karel. He wore no suit, no shimmer. He appeared more solid now, less alien, as if adjusted for human cognition. Rude, Elise said flatly, hiding her racing pulse. Necessary, Karel replied. You are the convergence point. The inflection must occur through you. You speak like this is still a lecture. Karel inclined his head. It is, but not one I conduct alone. Rafik entered behind her, face grim. He came to me too. I warned you this was a test, Karel continued. But I lied. It is not only a test. It is a selection, not of your kind, but of your future. Elise crossed her arms. You think we'll hand over our civilization to you? Karel's eyes glinted, not with malice, but calculation. We do not want your civilization. We want to see if you can control it yourselves, without collapsing under the weight of your own story." He gestured, and her living room faded. No transition this time, just subtraction. She stood suddenly in a chamber of mirrors. Each pane reflected not her face, but moments from human history: violence, beauty, contradiction. A monk on fire, a child coding a symphony, a gunman laughing, a nurse whispering to a dying stranger. "These are not accusations," Carell said. "They're thresholds. Every civilization reaches this moment. You must decide what kind of predator you choose to be." Rafik stepped forward. "You keep calling us that. Predators. But not all humans are killers." Carell looked at him. "You misunderstand. Predation is not about killing. It is about consuming. Time, space, identity. You consume meaning and excrete belief. You redefine the real through language. That is your power. That is your threat." The mirrors trembled. Elise reached out toward one that showed her own reflection standing amid ruins, clutching a tablet glowing with unreadable data. This is a possible future." Carell nodded. "A story you have not told yet. Can we choose another?" Carell's gaze intensified. "Only if enough of you agree. That is your species' paradox. Every individual can dream of peace, yet collectively you march to war. Unity eludes you because you tell too many stories at once." The mirror shattered. She was back in her apartment, alone, save for Rafik. He sank into a chair, hands trembling. "We're part of an exam, Elise. Not to see what we know, but to see what we become under pressure. They're not judging us. They're learning from us." Elise moved slowly, sat beside him, and whispered, "Then we tell the right story. One they can't ignore." It began that week, quietly, and then all at once. They published a manifesto, not a political declaration, but a cognitive map. It was not signed by governments or companies, but by storytellers, educators, and thinkers across the globe. It called for a new discipline: narrative stewardship. Humans had regulated air and water. They had set boundaries on biotech and atomic force. But never before had they treated storytelling as a technology of mass influence. The manifesto declared, "Our stories are tools. They can construct empathy, or they can engineer extinction. It is time we choose their direction as carefully as we choose where to point a weapon." The idea spread, not virally, but intentionally, through classrooms, art code conversation. People began questioning the narratives they consumed, the roles they played in them. Victim, villain, witness, God. And above it all, unseen yet present, the spiral watched. When Elise next saw Carell, he was no longer alone. A council stood behind him, entities she had never seen before. Each wore expressions unreadable by human standards. Yet there was no hostility. Carell spoke, softly this time. "You did not collapse. You recalibrated. That is rare." Elise held his gaze. "We're not perfect, but we adapt. That's our story." Carell stepped aside. The spiral symbol reappeared, not as threat, but as invitation. "Then write it well," he said, "because others are watching now, too." And with that, he was gone. The room was only a room again. But Elise knew everything had changed. Not just Earth's place in the cosmos, but the purpose of its voice. They were still predators, but now they had begun to hunt not for power, but for understanding. And the universe had just opened its eyes.